Now to politics and the impact of those across-the-board spending cuts known as the sequester. We're beginning to see some effects, such as longer lines at some airport screening checkpoints, as President Obama makes a move to force a compromise. Rachel Maddow is the host of MSNBC's The Rachel Maddow Show and the author of Drift, The Unmooring of American Military Power, which, by the way, is just out in paperback. Rachel, good morning. It's good to see you.
Nice to see you.
Talk about the book, which is increasingly timely as we speak, but let's talk about the sequester. Terrible phrase. We hate the word.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be something that forced both sides to the table, mutually assured destruction, cuts that were so bad they would never go into effect. Here we are in the sequester era. How does this end? What gets them to the table?
I was trying to come up with the perfect metaphor for understanding what we are doing to ourselves. In Prohibition, the government came up with the brilliant idea that to stop people from drinking, they would put poison in industrial alcohol. They didn't do anything to stop the underlying problem of people wanting to drink, and so what they did was poison a lot of people. This is the same kind of thing. It's supposed to be aversion therapy. It's supposed to be so awful we won't do it, but we've gone and done it anyway. It's self-imposed crisis.
And part of the effect, though, is this poison, to borrow your metaphor, it's not a poison that kills you overnight.
Right.
Apparently, it's a slow-rolling poison.
But it is designed to be harmful. I mean, that is the way the sequester cuts were put together. They were designed to be distasteful, to be blunt, and in the president's word, dumb. And they are, on both sides. Nobody likes what these do to the country. That was supposed to be enough to get us to not do them. The fact that it wasn't means we're in sort of a failed aversion therapy situation here right now. And we can't just keep governing this way if we've stopped being scared of the things we might inflict on ourselves.
What's so astonishing is, as we watched this unfold in slow motion, is that both sides really didn't seem to be negotiating at all, but rather just seemed to be positioning themselves to not take the blame. And I don't really want to perpetuate the blame gaming this morning, but to the extent that's what gets people to the table, the perception that one side or the other is losing, who do you think is better positioned to weather the storm?
I think the person who's better positioned to come out of this well is the person who says we need to stop governing this way. We've had, with the fiscal cliff, the debt ceiling standoff, the two government shutdown standoffs, now this sequester standoff. You know what? We've got to start naming these things like the hurricanes at this point.
We know your politics.
Govern.
Do you think anyone has the high road here?
I think that if you want to get out of this by doing a balanced approach, you're in a better situation than if you only want to get out of this by only getting all of what you want. So the president and the Democrats are asking for both sides. The Republicans are saying we won't compromise at all. I think that puts the Democrats in a better light. But honestly, the bigger problem is crisis to crisis to crisis is not the way the biggest country on earth should govern itself. Other countries spend their times trying to build up their resilience. So if there is a crisis, they can handle it. We instead invent our own crises. If there is an external problem, you look at this storm that Al's talking about, we've already got longer TSA lines than we otherwise would have. Now we're heading into a big storm. Why are we going to inflict that economic blow on ourselves?
Well, I want to talk to you about foreign policy, talk about Drift, which is now in paperback, and as I mentioned, is very relevant. I think yesterday we had Vice President Biden saying to a pro-Israel lobbying group that the United States is not bluffing when it comes to the military option against Iran. Your book is all about military intervention and the founders' intent that this country would actually be slow to intervene militarily. What do you make of it?
They structured the country, the founders structured the country not so that we would be pacifist, but so that we would be disinclined to war. I mean, if we hadn't been upset by what was difficult for us about supporting the British military, America wouldn't have existed in the first place. We didn't want to quarter their soldiers. We didn't want to pay for their military expeditionism. We have a peaceable bias in our structure. That ends up being subverted if it becomes very easy to go to war, or if when we are at war, we don't much notice.
And what do you do in then this modern era? How do you apply those founding principles as you describe them when you have in Iran basically talking about getting a nuclear capability, when you have something like Syria, even Libya?
Well, I think that the most important thing that I think the founders would tell us to do is to make sure that we have a realistic debate about this, and that the decision to go to war should not be the president's alone. Congress is invested with the power as to whether or not we make war. We've stopped thinking about it that way. We started thinking about the military as the president's to deploy at will. It doesn't work that way. It's supposed to be Congress that makes that decision. And yeah, it's harder for Congress to make decisions as a group of more than 400 people than it is for the president to do it alone. But that's how it's supposed to be, because we're all supposed to be engaged. Military families have had such a different life since 9/11 than the rest of us. We should not feel so separate from their experience. We should feel more like one country that's been at war, not a country that sent 1% to fight it without us noticing.
Well, it's a fascinating argument. If you're interested in it, Drift is now in paperback. Rachel Maddow, great to see you as always.
Thank you so much.